I'm going to visit my routes file, web, and 2 episodes ago, we set up this endpoint. When the user visits /projects, we load a projects controller. If we take a look at that controller, here's the action. We respond by fetching every project in the database. Often you won't want to do that, by the way. Often you will want to say, well, give me only the projects for this user. You can even do things like this once you've learned more. Give me all projects, but scoped to this given user. But for now, we'll just grab everything from the database. And then we pass that collection to this view called projects/index. If we go into our resources directory, into views, here's the file. We filter through all the projects and we echo the title of the project on the page. So if we take a look at this in the browser, we'll do PHP artisan serve. And I visit /projects. We currently have 2 projects. Let's add a new page to create a project. Okay. I would start that by visiting my routes file. And we'll say, let me duplicate this. When the user makes a GET request to /projects, and a common convention is this form. When I visit this endpoint, we should load an action called create. This action is responsible for displaying a view to create a new project. I'll go back to my projects controller. We now have a new method or action called create, and that can load a view called projects.create. Okay, it sounds like we need that view. So I will go to my resources, views directory, projects, and we need create.blade.php. Now you remember in the last episode, we just did everything here. I'm going to stick with that one more time, and then when we need to, we're going to switch to using layout files. So I'll grab that, create a new project, and let's see if it works. Projects/create now shows a view to create a new project. It sounds like we need a form. Now this form will need an input for the title of the project. We'll set a placeholder as well, project title. We also need a text area for the description. And we could do a label, but I'm just doing a placeholder to be quick. Project description. And then finally, I need a submit button. Create project. All right, so if we switch back to Chrome and give it a refresh, we have a very poorly styled form. That's okay, it's enough to get the job done. However, if I fill this out and create project, of course nothing happens. It just performs a GET request to itself. Instead, when creating a new project, it's standard practice to use a post request. And we're going to talk about the different request types in the next episode. For now, just go along with me. The simplest explanation is you can use a GET request to represent and display a resource or whatever it happens to be. A post request can be used to submit data that will then be processed in some way. So with that in mind, we're going to do a post request to where? We can specify that in the action. The endpoint, again, will be us following a common convention, /projects. So now you might be thinking, well, an endpoint of /projects, we already have that registered here. So how does that work? Well, think about it. When we submit this form, it's not making a GET request to /projects, which is what you see here, GET request to /projects. Instead, it's making a post request to /projects, which means we don't have any route set up for that. So if we submit it, we get an HTTP exception. This is basically the framework's way of saying, hey, I tried to submit this form, but there's no method that I can call here. I don't know what to do. So HTTP exception. Okay, let's fix that by registering a route. When the user makes a post request, they want to submit data to be processed to this same endpoint, then I will load projects controller and an action called store. Again, pay close attention to these method names. They can be anything you want, but we are following a very common convention here, and it's a convention I would recommend you follow as well as much as possible. This will make it easier for both you and for team members and future users of your code to understand. When I see a store method, I immediately know, oh, that is storing a new resource. Okay, so we now have a method called store. Now, how do I grab the information that the user typed into this form? Well, notice, of course, HTML 101, we did provide a name attribute for each of these inputs and text areas, right? That means it will be submitted along with the form request. We can access it here. Let's just say return request all. Get all of the data from the request. All right, Let's come back, refresh, some title, some body, submit. We must have made a mistake. Let's see, route post to /projects. That's all correct. Let's see where we submit it. Form method is post actions. Sorry about that. So let's try it one more time. We'll submit the form, and I bet we'll get something else here. Yes, we got a 419. So admittedly, this can be a little confusing at first. You're trying to figure out, how can I just submit a form and I keep getting some 419? And then you do Laravel 419, and you come across something like this. And you see something about 419s being related to token authorization. As it turns out, that's exactly the case. So if we come back, just go along with me, we're going to add this special helper here called CSRF field. You may not even know what CSRF stands for, so we'll talk about that soon. But if we give it one more try, before I submit this, I'm going to view the source by hitting Command-Option-U, and I want you to notice that CSRF field call expanded to this. That gives us a hidden input with a name of token and a unique special value that will be compared in the backend. This is something Laravel provides and enforces, although you can override it if you want. But by default, it enforces this out of the box to give you some extra security and protection. So now we give it a shot. Some title, some description. We create the project, and sure enough, here is our request data, which means we submitted the form, the route responded to this, and loaded a store method. We hit the store method, and all we did was we returned all of the request data, which means if I need the title or the description, I can do things like this. Request, and we have a little shorthand here. That will give me, in this case, some title, or request description will give me some description. Now we have everything we need to create and persist a new project. Let's use the format you've already learned. There's actually a different, more succinct way, but we're going to stick with this for now. We're going to create a new project. We'll set the title equal to request title. Yeah, there's actually a couple ways that we can make this a lot more succinct, but I want you to learn the long form way first. And then I'm going to set the description. Okay, create a new project, set the fields, and then save the project. Once it has been saved, I'm going to what? Well, it sounds like we need to redirect back to that page where we can view all projects. So it sounds like we need to redirect here. All right. Laravel provides a useful redirect helper. Redirect to /projects. And whenever you call redirect, by default, of course, that will be a GET request. Okay, are we all on the same page? You access this endpoint. That loads the create action. The create action simply loads a view. The view displays a form to accept user data, and it then submits a post request to this endpoint. We have a route registered for that endpoint that then calls a store method. The store method can access the request using this request helper. So we new up a project. Now notice we're not doing any validation yet. We're going to talk about that in its own lesson. But for now, we will accept the data, persist it, and then redirect to the page where we fetch all projects. That will then do a new query to fetch all projects from the database, and at that point, it should include the new project. So we're going to give this one last shot, and I think we should be good. My new project, very special description here. Create the project, and there it is. Let's do one final one. Something, run it, and now you have a new project. You can view this in the database by giving this a refresh, and there they are. All right, so now you've leveled up a little bit. Now you know about form handling. Most of this should be a basic recap other than this one section right here about CSRF. I want to talk about that more when we discuss security, but for now, if I go to HTTP kernel, if I scroll down, we talked a little bit about middleware. You'll see here, this is a list of middleware that are applied to all of your routes within here. So all of your web routes will be bound to these middleware, which means whenever you load a route, these will all fire. Among those is one called verify CSRF token. That's what's taking place here. Now, if I did not have that, we would have no need for this CSRF field. But still, I would recommend keeping it. This is free security and protection out of the box. Now, if you want bonus credit and you ever want to dig in, you can take a look at the middleware here. And if it ever looks blank, you can see, well, this is a helper for configuration, but it's actually extending another middleware within the vendor directory. So let's say Illuminate Foundation Verify CSRF token. And here's the main middleware that's doing all the work. You'll often look for a handle method. Every middleware has its own method called handle. You'll see a number of checks here. So if we're doing a basic read, we can move forward. If we're running our unit tests, we can skip basically. If we've added it to an exceptions array, or this is the one that's actually important to us, tokens match. So if the token submitted with the form matches the one that we have in the back end, then we're good to go. Otherwise, we're throwing a token mismatch exception. Something funny. There's funny business going on here, and we're just going to abort, basically. And that's what we were seeing earlier. Because think about it. If I didn't have that, and back to Chrome, we create a new project, submit it, it didn't match. So what happened was this section, did the tokens match? Nope. Throw a mismatch exception, and behind the scenes, that gets converted to a 419. Again, this is all the higher level bonus credit. So if you're thinking, whoa, what's going on here? It's okay. I'm just trying to give you the bird's eye view of what's happening. So we fetch the token from the request. So we're trying to find this token that's supplied here, and we save it. Then we check to see, well, if it's not a string, like if you didn't even add a token, then sorry, we're going to return false. You need CSRF protection. But otherwise, we're going to check if the token submitted with the form matches the token that Laravel stores in the session. Those should be identical. And think about it. What if you were on a different site entirely and you submitted that form, but what you didn't know is even though you were on a different domain, that form was actually submitting to my domain. It's tricking you. It's trying to grab data from you. It's trying to see what it can access. That's what's happening here. So what happens is our app stores a special token in the session. And when you submit that form, we're going to expect there to be some token key that matches up with this private token that we have in our session. And if somebody's doing something malicious by submitting a form on a different domain to our server, well, they're not going to know what that token is, which means it's not going to line up. And again, we throw a 419. So this is free protection you get out of the box. You didn't even need to know that this was something to worry about. Laravel simply protects you out of the box. And all you need to know is when you submit a form, make sure you always include the CSRF field.